Hello and welcome to Strong Talk, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of equity as it relates to mental health and addictions. A space not only to talk about challenges, but to explore and create space for solutions. I'm your host, Vic Armstrong. I want to thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm joined today by Ray Stenglein. Ray is a husband and father of two beautiful girls, but Ray is also a survivor of suicidal loss, having lost a daughter to suicide in 2016, as well as having another daughter who has had multiple attempts dating back to 2012. Ray has been in the construction industry for over 40 years and has become an advocate for mental well being and suicide prevention. Ray is president of the local nonprofit Wings of Hope and co-facilitates the suicide survivor support group, Heartbeat. His best known quote is, "You can live 4 weeks without food, 4 days without water, 4 minutes without air, but only 4 seconds without hope." Ray, welcome to the Strong Talk podcast.
Thank you, Vic. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to be with us today. And I want to get right into this by just having our audience get to know a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little bit about you. And I shared just a little bit of your story, but if you would talk a little bit about what brings you to this space and what's going on with you and your family.
Certainly will. Typical. I was born and raised in Twin Cities in Minnesota, so it's a large community. Met my wife down there about 33 years ago. We moved from there to a small town just west of the cities, which is about 21,000 people there, and that's where we kind of started our family and had. Our first daughter was born, and then we had our second daughter. And I've been in the construction industry for over 40 some odd years now, and life is going the way you would expect it to go. And in 2012 was the first time that mental health entered our arena, when my oldest child attempted for the first time of 5 attempts, which her most recent was about 3.5 years ago. The struggles at 2012, as we kind of all know, that was kind of when the internet and cell phones really blew up in our world. And to find, the resources was extremely difficult. As a parent, as a construction worker, we're problem solvers. We can solve anything. Give me the tools. And trying to find the tools was impossible. When she had her 72-hour hold, it was like, it's all done. Here you go. Have fun. Find help. And I was like, what do you do? So we kind of struggled around trying to figure out what's out there, what's available, what can you do, and was kind of living our life that way. In 2016, my youngest daughter, late 2015-ish, she started having problems as well. Different issues in school, things that were going on in her life. And unfortunately, in December 2016, she lost her battle and died by suicide. That's really when my world had really changed, really blew up even more than what it was. I was, kind of lost as a family, as a father. It hit me really hard. You lost your daughter. You're supposed to protect your family. And it was kind of a struggle that I was dealing with at that point in time. And as that progressed, I actually found her. So I was also dealing with PTSD at the same time. And with the construction industry, you're on the road and you've got a lot of downtime in the evenings, and it really, my purpose in life was being challenged, and I kind of dove into the self-medicating at that point in time with alcohol to deal with the issues that I was dealing with. While doing all this, I did join up. AFSP had a walk in our community, which I had no clue even existed for the 6 years prior to the loss of my daughter, Annika. And they walked up to me and said, "Well, we're not doing this anymore. Do you want to do the walk?" And it's like, okay, what's a walk? What do I do? So I said, well, of course I have to do something, because this is something in my family, something that I felt that I needed to tell our story, make a difference with families, with kids, with teenagers, and with teachers that this is an issue that we need to deal with. So I did. I took on the walk. And shortly thereafter, the AFSP local chapter asked me to join their board, and that's how I became more involved with AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in this area. And then it was about 3 years ago when the state of Minnesota decided, the reports kind of came out that in the construction industry, that suicide was the second leading cause of death in our industry. And so they started the state of Minnesota's Construction Coalition for Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Awareness, a big, long title here. And as an AFSP board member, I was brought in on the ground floor to help them and guide them through where they are today. And it was at that kind of point when I was kind of awakened as well. This is my industry.
Yeah.
This I've been in all my life, and this is such a big deal. So my focus kind of has gone towards that direction.
That is wow. That is a lot. So let me ask you this, because I wanna take a step back to really talk a little bit about how all this impacted you, and then kind of how you transform that pain into to being the advocate that you are today. But to start with, I know you said in your opening comments that you grew up in Minnesota, I believe you said.
Correct.
And you've been in the construction industry for how many years now? Was it 40
Over,
years?
over 40 years, yes.
So both of those, when I think about Minnesota, you think of that, that kind of hearty Midwestern type of attitude and the approach toward life. And then here you are also a man in the construction industry, which is a very, we think of as a very testosterone filled, uh, very masculine industry. And so when you think about those two things, neither of those are usually conducive to someone being really open about talking about mental health challenges, emotional challenges. And yet you find yourself in a space where you're having to deal with this in your own household. How did you initially bring yourself, or was that something that was already a part of your thinking? How did you bring yourself to really seek out and for connection and for help?
It's a very good question. And, as somewhat of an introvert myself, I am not a person that really wanted to be out in front of people. I don't talk in front of large groups of people. It's just one of those things that I stayed in the weeds. As you said, as a construction worker, as a man, you don't share your feelings.
Hmm.
But as we were dealing with this, my wife and I, it's one of those things that we would sit there every night and you wouldn't really talk because I knew she was feeling the same way I was feeling. So
Hmm.
it's really, we weren't conveying this conversation, but it was like something inside of me was screaming. I wanted to yell. One of the things as a parent who loses a child, you want the whole world to feel how painful this is. But you also wanted to do it in a constructive way so that no other family ever felt this. There was a group in town that was trying to put on a program, and they called it Hope Out Loud at the time, and they asked us to come and help them decide how to bring a message to our community about hope and all this stuff. And they were kind of struggling. And by the time we hit our fourth or fifth meeting, it was like they all turned to me and said, "Why don't you tell your story?"
Hmm.
So I will, for the first time, it was about 4 months afterwards, I told my story in front of a group of about 100, 120 people at a community event.
Yeah.
And it was just like dead quiet. Everyone was focused in on me. And it just kind of became, this is my avenue. This is how I can make a difference, is tell my story.
Hmm.
And hopefully everyone can learn that this is not the place. That I don't need anyone else to join this club.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much power in storytelling. I don't think a lot of people realize just how powerful it is, and especially when people look at you, when I as a man look at you and I say, well, here's a man, a man's man, a construction worker, and he's willing to make himself vulnerable. That's encouraging. But I have to ask you this, because you mentioned also that you went down kind of down the route of self medicating, and I can imagine and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can imagine that in the construction industry, it is probably in some ways easier to mask the challenges of addiction than the pain of dealing with mental and emotional strain. I would assume that you probably, people are probably more open with excessive drinking than they would be with talking about emotional pain in your field. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a very fair assessment. With our field, it's a dominated field of, like you said, testosterone. It's like
Mhm.
I am the solver of everything. I can do anything and everything, as well as all pain. It's very hard. It's very grueling. It's long hours. It's overnights. It's weekends. It's dealing with heavy equipment, and you don't want to show, just like in sports, football, next man up. If you don't show up because you're in pain, the next person will take your job, and so you tend to hide and mask your pains, which mental health is the same thing as a physical industry. Your brain is no different than your lungs or your heart. When they're hurting, when they need help, you need help.
Yeah.
And people just don't realize that mental health is just as important as physical health. So while you're in this industry, while you're dealing with your pain, it's a lot easier to hide it behind the alcohol, behind drugs, to ease that pain to help you get through to the next day, which also doesn't make you very safe person on a job site.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a whole other issue that you deal with those things, and it's such a dangerous field anyway. What about you mentioned also that the suicide being the second leading cause of death in your field is that, and because the field doesn't talk about things like that, how well known is that to folks that in the construction industry?
It is really, I mean, it's starting to become known because we are making it a top priority right now.
Uh-huh.
But no, it's not known. You don't think of it because it is that stigma. You grew up with it. When I start looking back at it afterwards, prior to my oldest daughter's attempt, I lost two coworkers to suicide. But
Wow.
you would block that out. It's stigma. They're weak. It's whatever you want to call. I don't want to. I don't want to think
Right.
about that. So you just kind of bury that. You don't think about it. And as it comes aware, I mean, again, the stats. Most of us know the stats. The largest um, group of people are men between the
Yeah.
ages of 25 and 55 who are dying by suicide.
Hmm.
And even a bigger number than that, what you need to look at, it's the number of attempts. For every suicide, there is completion. There's 33 attempts. So it is huge. It's way larger. So these are people, and it's not the same attempt. It's a new attempt every single day. And we have to understand that this is huge in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as you are, starting to wrap your head around this and starting to share your story. Now, for someone like me who's a social worker who works in this field, your story is very well received, and I appreciate your story, and I can have empathy, and I can, and I can encourage you to tell that story because someone else needs to hear it. What was the response though in the field, the construction field, when you started sharing your story and started encouraging folks to really um, acknowledge this as a problem? What was the initial response from folks in the construction industry?
Surprisingly, extremely well. It was very well taken. I took and got myself trained. I've been through assist mental health first aid. I teach QPR, Talk Saves Live, Safe Talk, and I wanted to bring this to our industry as well. So with this coalition, I was allowed to come into construction companies in the springtime for the spring safety meetings, and they give me an hour to present my story.
Mm.
And I always talk about this as kind of interesting, is that I get there early as I want to kind of feel the group and see what's going on. And I'm watching their spring meetings, and you can see groups of people are screwing around and playing on their phones, laughing when they're talking about ladder, safety, fall protection, all that stuff. And so while I'm up there and I'm starting to tell my story and adding my storytelling to these gatekeeper training, I look around and I kind of focus right at those tables.
Mhm.
They're locked in. I mean, the room is locked in the whole entire time. And when I'm done, I can have 65-year-old, big, burly, biker looking dudes walk up to me and give me a hug and say, "Thank you for sharing," or "This is what I'm going through. I have felt this, I have seen this," or whatever. And it just, the response has been phenomenal. On job sites, I'll have my stickers on my truck and I'll have, inspectors, state inspectors, pull me aside and say, "Can we talk?"
Wow.
They want to talk. They really truly want to talk. They just need to have that conduit. They need to be given permission to talk.
Yeah. And that is so true. And I think for men in particular, there's this perception that men don't want to talk about mental health challenges. Men don't want to talk about emotional pain. And I would, I'd say that the reality is that men want to talk about it, but men need to feel very safe in talking about it. Men are not comfortable with making themselves vulnerable. But when they have safe space to talk about this, men are open to talking about emotional pain. So as you are opening up and talking about your challenges, and you mentioned, how you were beginning to see men begin to respond to your messages one on one. But as an industry, the construction industry has been surprisingly responsive because there's now this collaboration between the construction industry and AFSP. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like?
Absolutely. The Bechtel Corporation has stepped up with us right now, and they
Hmm.
made a sizable donation to make a difference. They wanted to get 500,000 people trained across the country into gatekeeper trainings. And it is a wonderful step up from a company. And to bring that into our local area, into Minnesota, and present that and say, here's a company that has stepped up. And all the rest of these companies want to step up. They just want to know, what can we do? How can we do this? And one of the biggest struggles that we dealt with from the get-go was that they're all kind of looking for this one button, this button,
Mhm.
easy button. Push this, the problem's done and solved. And it isn't that easy. This is
Right.
going to be for the long haul. This
Yeah.
is something we have to change the total industry into our thought process, that we need to do this every single year, and we have to be changing, and the narrative is going to change, but we have to be willing to change for the culture of the different people that are coming into our industry, so that this is an industry that people want to come and work at.
That's an excellent point. And I think even more so with today's generation. I think younger people are much more in all fields. I think they're much more interested in that feeling of belonging, that feeling of safety. So it's bound to resonate. But what would be the impact, in your opinion, on the construction industry if we were able to get 500 people trained in suicide prevention? How would that impact the industry?
Oh, I think it would impact the industry huge. It's by being able to get out there and show that someone's willing to have this conversation, to share their stories. You open up other people in your company that will share their story, and you realize that you're not alone.
Yeah.
You can have this conversation, and it should be. We should be able to every single day walk up and say, "How are you doing?" and really mean, "How are you doing?" I
Yeah.
don't want
And so
basic answer, fine. I want to be able to say, if you're hurting, you can tell me.
And it sounds like leaders in the construction industry, because you talk about Bechtel and their willingness to embrace this. It sounds like leaders in the construction industry are on board with this collaboration. And so, are you seeing where other construction industry leaders, in addition to Bechtel, have joined into this conversation now?
Absolutely have. Of course, it's a little regional because I'm more focused in Minnesota, but I was down in Texas for some um, continuing education. There's definitely companies all throughout Texas and other areas that are doing this, but even in our area, we're doing our first Hike for Hope this year, and I've already have up to 10 companies that have come to sponsor it and are going to bring groups to this walk, this construction Hike for Hope. And they continue to bring me in to help train them. And they want to do the right thing. It's so refreshing to see that it's every single year. It's like my bidding every year. I don't know what I'm doing every year because I have to bid something new.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's quiet, quiet, quiet. Now, in January, February comes around. It's like, well, safety meetings are coming up. Can you come? Can you come? Can you
Yeah.
come? It keeps happening. So I know it's growing. We're making a difference.
Fantastic. And can you talk a little bit more about the Hike for Hope?
I certainly can. This is as a person who's done an out of darkness walk I just completed my 8th one here in Wilmer. I just, decided to do this Hike for Hope, and we have partnered with the Vikings in a way. In Egan, they have a practice facility that they built, and they have this great
Oh, the
facility.
Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings.
The
Okay.
Minnesota Vikings, yes. They have a great facility here that where their practice field is and whatnot, and they have a great couple ponds. And they wanted to join in with us so that we could have the walk, and in the future, if we want to do a run, we can do a run. But they also have a construction company within themselves.
Uh-huh.
And so they wanted to sponsor and get it out to all their subcontractors. And I got them coming and wanting to sponsor and want to come and join this. And they realized that this, they're not just in this state, they're in several states. So it's just the growth, just the
Yeah.
getting the word out has just really expanded in many different areas I never expected would happen.
Wow, that's fantastic. When you mentioned too about working with Minnesota Vikings and the construction as it pertains to that organization, it's also a reminder of the intersectionality of this work in construction, because there are a lot of organizations. You think about construction and you think about maybe someone working on building a new skyscraper, or working on a house or whatever. But a lot of organizations that we don't think of, large organizations, large corporations, they have a construction component within their organization. I used to work for a large hospital system. We had a construction department in our hospital system because they worked on building out other businesses. So when you touch the construction industry, it is really far reaching, because you're actually reaching into a lot of other different spaces. So that in and of itself is exciting. I would imagine too that part of the challenge has been, even when you want to address issues around suicide, that people oftentimes struggle with what to say and how to say it, and how to interact with someone who they think, or approach someone who they think may be struggling. Um, how has that been empowering for you, having access to tools and resources and the verbiage that you can share with people? Because I know it had to be initially for you, when you first started going through this with your daughters, you had to feel like you're on an island. What do I do? How do I handle this? And now, in spite of the challenges you've had, you're one of the folks now that's empowering people to know how to talk about this, and to be able to have the conversations. How empowering is that?
It is extremely empowering. I think that this journey, my journey, when I look back at it, that it's been twofold. I started in the schools with the teenagers, with teachers and parents, and the one thing that I've always done is a tad bit of a rebel. I'm going to tell my story. This is the way it is, like it or not.
Mhm.
And but again, in the beginning, there was more anger behind my grief, more frustration, and I thought I was going to knock down the highest mountain in a day or two, and realized that's not happening.
Yeah.
The frustrations, with schools, with teenagers, with communities, is they're a little more hesitant. And now with the construction industry, it's been totally an awakening, per se, that they have accepted it. The construction industry is just something fabulous, because when safety was an issue, they all banded together and figured out, we can make our job site safety. Safety is
Yeah.
number one. They want to tackle stuff like this, and they have really grabbed this and ran with it. And it's the same thing. I'm telling my story.
Yeah.
I can tell all aspects, from being at home to my own struggles on a job site. And just like I said, the storytelling helps break open the conversation and lets them know it's okay to have it.
Yeah, and I can tell you, as someone who works for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, I can tell you this partnership with the construction industry has been extremely gratifying. It's one of the most exciting things that I think that we've taken on, and in part because of the reach and because of the potential that this partnership has. I do want to ask you this. You had mentioned early on in the conversation also about your battle with addictions and self-medicating, trying to deal with the pain you were feeling. Once you were able to give voice to your pain, and once you were able to share your story, and once you're able to find resource and find connection, how did that impact your self-medicating?
The self-medicating, I would say everyone's journey is going to be different. And mine, I think it was more of a wake-up call one day that just said that this is not right. What I'm doing is not right for myself.
Mhm.
My message still was there, and always has been strong. But about a year ago, I went to one of AFSP's loss and healing summits down in Texas.
Mhm.
And through that grieving process, I had a wake up call one morning at I just kind of woke up, and for the first time ever, I said, Annika is 24 years old today. I
Wow.
can actually say that. She is her story. We all talk about we're going to see them again someday. And her story is living through me.
Yeah.
She is living with me. We are growing this story. And it has been a new, refreshing look on life. Is that, you're always afraid when people say,
Yeah.
how many kids do you have? Well, I have one. Do I really want to tell you about the second one or not? And instead of wearing that badge of she died at 16, I can say she's 24.
Yeah.
And that has really helped the overall healing and the addiction aspect of this to know that I don't need that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry you had to endure that pain. But I could also hear in your voice, um, just I don't know what the right word is, but when you say her name, I can tell how empowering that is to you to be able to say her name, to embrace her memory. And I applaud you for that. And I know so many people understand what that's like because they've been where you are. And I think that's one of the things that's so empowering about your story is that it's not just your story. Other people have been there, may not have known how to deal with it, and you found a way not only to deal with the pain, but also to help other people to deal with theirs. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what life is all about. How do you empower other people to be stronger? Do you have or what would your message be, especially to men out there who are struggling, either struggling because they've lost someone or they're struggling because they're in a bad place themselves and not sure if they want to live or die? What would be your message to a man who says, I can't tell anybody about this?
I hate the word I can't. That's a real easy cop out for anyone because you're choosing not to. Um, And, again, this is the stigma of our world. Our parents, our grandparents, nobody wanted to talk about this way back when. We're talking about it now. It's out there. You see the commercials, you see the programs, you see everything that we're doing. People are aware of it. So you may not, it's just no different than children when they say, I can't talk to my mom or dad, or I can't talk to teachers. Who can I talk to? There's someone. It's just look, just ask, just knock on doors. Don't be afraid. And for the rest of us, it's time to start listening. Just learn to be listeners and not, want to solve their problems because that's not what they're looking for. They're just looking for someone to hear them out
Yeah.
because we know there's a shortage of beds and shortage of therapists, but yet there's not a shortage of people willing to care and listen.
We all have the capacity to be someone else's safe space. I think that's very empowering. I do want to before we wrap up, I want to go back to this quote of yours because I just found to be very moving. Your quote: "You can live 4 weeks without food, 4 days without water, 4 minutes without air, but only 4 seconds without hope." Where did that come from? That is so powerful.
I had heard that somewhere years ago, and it just something that just kind of popped in. I had met with a gentleman, Cal Byers, and he is wonderful. I'm sure you know who he is as well.
Yeah.
And I told him that one day, and it's part of this whole message is that we know suicide is a 10-minute window. It's a small window when you think or believe you lost hope. And I really believe it. We don't lose hope. The desire in us to live is stronger than it is to die. And we want to keep hope. It's there, and that's the whole thing. So we can't live without hope, and I believe we all have it. We just need to find it.
Yeah. Ray, I have to tell you, your this time with you has been just so empowering for me. Hearing your story, and hearing the resolve in your voice about making a difference for other people, for me is also just inspiring to hear. Do you have any, as we're getting ready to wrap this conversation up, do you have any final thoughts? Anything I have not asked you that you'd like to share? If you want to plug an event coming up, give the floor to do that as well.
All I would have to say is really when I start all my presentations of programs, no matter what industry I'm talking to, is that we need to learn that we need to have these conversations at home as well.
Mhm.
You got to be comfortable enough to say something to your wife, to your father, to your mother, to your children. And then it'll be just as easy to have that conversation with a coworker because that's what this is about. We're talking about getting into businesses and coworkers. Well, we know we spend 2/3 of our lives with our coworkers,
Yeah.
so they're basically family members. So it should be easy enough just to have this conversation and just be strong enough to listen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ray Stenglein, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Strong Talk podcast. I want to thank all who tuned in today to listen to the podcast. Thank you for joining in with us today. And as always, if you're listening to us, if you're out there, and if you're living with mental health challenges, get support. If you or someone you know are in crisis, you can call 988. If you need access to resources, feel free to go to our website, afsp.org. You can find resources there on how to support suicide prevention. You can join a walk. You can find support groups. You can even find all this great work that Ray is doing because you matter. Your life matters. Your pain matters. You are not alone. And we want you to be here tomorrow and every day after that. And that is Strong Talk.